Everyone, our next presenter is going to be Marc Fischer from the University of Cologne, and he's going to be talking about how to leverage the brand to impress your investors. Oh, yeah, that's important. Yeah, there's the title.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, really happy to be here and enjoy the 2 days. It's actually quite some time ago when I was last time presenting at MASB, and so it feels good to be back and to just present the research which I hope delivers what it promises, but you are the judges. So please just jump in and ask questions, bring up your comments. I think that's most valuable to everybody if we do it that way. So what I'm presenting is a work that I think did together with a wonderful colleague, and it's got published in Management Science. So it's research, but I think it has a real meaning to practice, and hopefully is also changing a little bit the way how we think about leveraging the brand. Let me start with that chart here from Harley-Davidson. Without any doubt, an iconic American brand. And what you see here is, with the bars, is the development of the brand strength measured by Equitrend over the time period from 2005 to 2013. And as we know, it's not so easy to change that rating. It's a scale from 0 to 100, but they did well, improved slightly by 5% over these years. And it's a strong brand without any doubt. But what is then interesting is when we look at the brand value measured by Interbrand. By the way, Brand Finance has the same kind of pattern.
It's in brand
Brandy, I don't know. I didn't look it up. But, so the brand value is actually decreasing. And when we look at the profitability, it has reduced a little bit, but not that much. And it also shows that Harley-Davidson is a highly profitable brand, earning on average almost 3 times its average cost of capital. And that poses the question, the puzzle, why is that the case? We have that strong brand, and we have that development of the brand value. And when we look at the market capitalization, that is also decreasing over that time. So that brings me to question what happens here. And I think before I get closer to the point I would like to make, we need to think about what does it mean leveraging the brand, because that is connected with the way how you market the brand. And when we look at the basic approaches to market strategy, we have those three candidates, and that means brand penetration. That's one of the first approaches. Means strengthening the focus that the brand has on increasing the purchase consideration of the number of customers within the pool of those who know the brand or familiar with the brand, that it's also considering buying the brand. So that means brand penetration. Then brand segmentation, obviously also one of the fundamental and one of the origins of marketing, I would say, as well, the heterogeneity of customers. And that means the focus is here on brand profiling, on serving distinct customer segments. And the third market strategy is to expand the brand by addressing, by conquering new markets, particularly geographic markets, or many important aspect is the geographic expansion, but we can think also of other kind of markets. What we are looking here in that specific research is actually the geographic expansion of the market of the brand across geographic markets. So these three strategies, I think every firm is to some extent pursuing these three strategies, but you can't do all the three at the same intensity all the time. So you need to focus. And that tells you also that defines the mode, how you exploit, how you employ the brand. That's the mode of conduct to go to the market. And that also changes the way how you are leveraging the brand, which is also making a difference when we look at the financial results. And here are three financial outcomes: the profitability, defined as the return on invested capital, earnings growth, don't need to explain, and sustainability of excess return, which I define as the finance market equivalent of a competitive advantage. Because that means how long am I able to earn the excess return, which means the return of invested capital over the capital cost. And that is a period which is under pressure because of competition. So competition drives down the rents to the cost of capital, but the brand is a means that helps to be sustainable, to withstand the periods where that I'm able to actually earn this excess returns. When we look at the brand and the market strategies, then each of these strategies has generally a positive impact on these financial results, but there are also differences in the sense that brand penetration is actually having a larger impact on the sustainability of excess returns, because that makes the brand relevant, that increases the share of the customers that is loyal to the brand, that is also keeping that relationship over a longer time period, and is less vulnerable to competitive attacks. That's why it is having a relatively larger impact on sustainability of excess returns. It's also growing earnings. Segmentation is different from that in the sense that here the idea is to really target specific segments, to also make the brand more differentiating, and also allowing for a group of customers that does not like your brand, and that is different, but the way you are targeting and you're becoming more relevant for a specific group also allows you to benefit from a larger willingness to pay, to skim actually that willingness to pay in your pricing. It also lowers the servicing costs. And so that's why segmentation and for this has a major impact on, or larger impact on profitability. And the expansion, that is growing earnings. That's, I think that's also by nature from that idea that you expand the brand across geographic markets, but it is also helping be profitable. When you think of retailers, serving a retailer is easier if you are broader, distributed across the country. You have the advantage of the listings and so on. So that's why there's also the impact on profitability. So there are these differences, and it's important to keep that in mind. Because now that moves us to the next question we should ask. First, I would like to briefly explain why are these financial outcomes so relevant. They are because when we look at the standard discounted cash flow approach of firm valuation, then we can decompose actually the value from future investments into financial value drivers, and that's excess return, that's earnings growth, and that's sustainability of excess returns. And the excess return is, as it is defined, as the spread of the return on invested capital over the capital cost. It is actually composed of two drivers. So the cost of capital is the fourth one. But that standard firm valuation model actually tells us, okay, here we have four crucial value drivers, which are influenced, which are impacted by leveraging the brand. And I'm not going to consider the cost of capital in more detail because that's the thing that you can influence the least. We have some research, it's also going on, some indirect way, there's also an impact of brands on cost of capital. But I think that's from a management point of view, that is not really what you can drive. So let me now combine that perspective by understanding that the brand or the marketing has an impact on these financial value drivers, but it is a differential kind of impact. To bring that into a logic where we also start looking from the financial valuation, so from the capital market, to understand what is actually driving that value, and that is something which does not need to be the case that it is equally important if we consider each of these financial value drivers. But in many cases, actually, it is different. And that brings me to this chart here, which is just an illustration focusing on the return on invested capital and growth, so profit or growth as value drivers, and to look at three different scenarios where we would like to understand, okay, is my marketing effective in driving profitability or growth, or both of that? And then to look at the capital market. So how effective is actually that value driver from the perspective of the capital market? And then we combine that to come up with the ultimate measure of financial marketing effectiveness, which is, I'm using elasticities, just the percentage increase in firm value or another outcome due to a percentage increase in the marketing effort or the brand perception, whatever you would like to take. So in the first case, we actually see, well, the brand is effective in driving profitability, not so much for growth, but I'm sorry, that was a capital market. It's not effective in driving either growth or profitability. So it doesn't make any difference to what extent the value drivers are important for the driving the firm value. The result is that the brand is not financially effective at all. So that's the ineffective case. But then we have two effective cases in the sense that the brand is actually able to drive profitability in that case, or growth in that case. But what turns out to materialize in the financial market and the valuation is only the case two, because here the brand is driving the value driver, which is also relevant for driving value, for generating value. And here in that case, it is not effective for driving the value, even though the brand is quite effective. And that is, I think, the main point, the main argument in that research that explains why there are differences in the financial results from a point of investor, how the brand is actually leveraged. In some cases, it is more successful. In other cases, it is less successful. And and that's the explanation behind the example, which I used in the introduction for Harley-Davidson. That's just an overview across different industries to see, there is some variation, even at the aggregate industry level in terms of the relevance of the financial value drivers, but also the ability to use the brand to drive each of these financial value drivers. The differences are much larger when you look at individual companies. So here's my 2x2 matrix. See, even if you are working in academia, you come across that wonderful tool to try to simplify that. But this strategic priority matrix, as we labeled it, is actually an easy way to just organize the insights from the analysis of the relevance of the value drivers for the value generation and the ability of the brand to drive these value drivers. So we have on the y-axis the leverage effect, And that's bounded by some benchmark, which you can define, could be the average of the competition, or could be a strategic competitor or whatsoever. What we did is the academic approach, we estimated efficient frontier by taking into account differences in competition and resources and so on. What is attainable and achievable for a brand? So it could be high or low. And then we have the relevance of the financial value driver, could be high or low. And then four possibilities arise. Of course, both is low priority to look at that potential of the brand to generate value. The interesting cases and the best case, of course, is if you are strong in driving the strongest value driver. But the other two cases are, that's the cases when there's something to be done. And you could have a driver which is highly effective, influenced by the brand, but it's not effective in driving the firm value. So it's a false opportunity or missed opportunity that you actually are not driving the important value drivers by leveraging your brand. And that brings me to the application to Harley-Davidson. You probably have already thought about it. They did not do a bad job at all. They used the brand. It was really focusing on segmentation, on serving that distinct knowledge and heritage of the brand, also skimming the willingness to pay. So the data show they're really well in driving profitability, but at that time for their brand, it was not what the capital market was asking for. They said, well, you're fine with profitability, but you grow value by growing the brand, by moving sustainability, or by generating earnings growth and leverage your brand in that way. So that's the outcome for Harley-Davidson. That was the example. We brought this into a general framework, strategic. We call it strategic brand analysis and planning, and it's a fact-driven way to use insights analytics in a rather strategic process. And we start by estimating actually what is the gap. We quantify the gap in terms of dollars. What is there on the table that is not used, that is left on the table because you are not optimally leveraging your brand. And then we start with analyzing the strengths and the weaknesses. So on which of these value drivers is the brand strong or weak? And then it gets into the strategic planning process. So prioritizing which are the important financial value drivers that I should focus on. Then it goes on to the question, okay, what should be the market strategy focus? Given I'm assuming I should strengthen profitability, then it seems to be segmentation and profiling is the preferred mode. And we end up with a heuristic that tells you how much you should actually allocate resources. It's not about that it's only one strategy that you are pursuing, but it's a question, it's a mix. So it's oftentimes we know that you should not push everything into with just one bucket. So just coming to the research in a little bit more detail, but I'm summarizing what we found. Actually, that's the database. It's a large database. We used Equitrend data, and it's at the individual level. We have that data available, so more than 30 million observations from individuals, 600 publicly listed firms. The time frame, it's a little bit dated, but research is also a process which is not that fast, and it depends on the data also that you have available. And many of the financial variables available. That's the key brand strength measure. So Equitrend is measuring that by two components: brand knowledge, brand relevance, and so purchase consideration, perceived quality, familiarity, something which is not completely different from other approaches, but you could use other approaches too. So how do you measure actually the implementation of the strategies, the success of the strategies? So for brand penetration emphasis, there's simply the difference between that rating of consideration to brand knowledge. And the interesting thing is you observe the same aggregate brand rating by differently composed by measures and examples that are differently composed, because you could drive up both of these components, or you could drive up one over the other. In the averaging, the equivalent measure is the same, but it makes a difference in what reflects the brand penetration. Brand segmentation is simply looking at customer base and looking how diverse it is and how separated the customer segments are there. It's a dispersion measure of that brand rating. And the geographic expansion is basically, we call it an entropy measure. It looks at the how evenly distributed is the strength in terms of the preference of the brand across the 50 US states. That's application here. We could extend it to international markets of whatever you define as a market. I'm skipping in the interest of time of that, just giving you an example. The brands are quite different over these different metrics that we're using. This is, I need to explain. That's a graph showing on the left-hand side, if we manage to increase the brand rating by 10%, which is doable. It's not easy, but it's something which is doable. So then on average, you would be able to increase the brand value by 1.1 billion US dollars, which is fine. It's reflecting the strength and the power of the brand. When we look at the gap and just bring in that information that brands are activating the most potent value driver, and then also to look at how they could improve in terms of their leveraging their strengths to drive that value driver, we actually end up with a gap which is on average around 2 billion US dollars. So that means in percentages, it's only 35% that we find the sample of the brands that they use the potential to leverage the brand. The differences across industries, across brands, but that's the average, which shows what? There's quite some substantial money left. Going back to the example of Harley-Davidson. So how does it look like? I'm sorry that I need to engage you in these numbers on a Friday morning, but yeah, that's when we invite everything. So the financial value of elasticity with respect to the value driver is shown on the first row. And you see profitability is driving, but it's almost double the effectiveness that the other two drivers have, which shows the important ones are earnings growth and sustainability of excess return. At that moment, I'm not telling that this is always the same. It's a situation which doesn't change from one year to the next year, but it changes over longer time periods. And then when we look at the brand impact on the value drivers, so in terms of profitability, you see the current and the potential growth, meaning that this is the potential, that is what is achievable for Harley-Davidson. For profitability, there is not so much left what can be achieved still. But for earnings growth and sustainability, the gap is quite substantial. That means here is, we would say, German language is music. So that means there is something that the brand could actually do better, leverage, and that shows up in the final measure of the actual brand firm value elasticity, which is surprisingly low, 0.06. You would say, well, for such a iconic brand, that's not what I would expect it. But the best in class brand firm value elasticity for Harley-Davidson would actually be 0.47, translating into $700 million as a potential. And that's the last slide. Even more numbers, not going into it, just showing we use that information. What is the gap, also in the effectiveness of the brand of driving the financial value drivers. And we can bring this into an allocation formula. Actually, it's very simple. You can do it on a sheet of paper, Excel. And it shows that actually, you should reallocate the resources and focus on brand penetration, followed by brand expansion. And then segmentation, they're doing well. It doesn't mean that you should give up on this. It's just a reallocation of the resources and the refocus to leverage that growth potential. So summarizing, again, for Harley-Davidson, prioritize the appropriate KPIs, adapt the market strategies. And I would like to finish with that chart here, because you're asking, okay, how do I find out which of these strategies should I use under which kind of conditions? It actually turns out, when you do the math, that you have just to ask the question, how profitable am I? And that's comparing the return on invested capital with the average weighted average cost of capital. And if that is larger than 2 times the weighted average cost of capital, then the capital market shows, oh, you are profitable. That's fine. Now you need to grow. Then you make me happy. And it's not so much, you don't need to push up the profitability again. If it's around these 2 times the cost of capital, then it's both of these value drivers are equally important, more or less. If it's between that cost of capital and the double as large as the cost of capital, it's the focus profitability. If it's below the cost of capital, you have a different problem. You don't think about brand, you think about restructuring and cost cutting. And that translates into these strategy emphasis. So when the drivers growth should be pushed, it's about penetration and expansion. When it's about profitability, it's also think about expansion, but also about market segmentation. And that's a simplified, but I think some sort of strategy guidance schema that you can use by just looking at profitability numbers. And think about, okay, am I really leveraging my brand in the most effective way? Thanks.
Many questions.
Of course.
I'll start with 2 of them. The rest of the will go. Okay. Those norms on the left-hand side, is this what came out of your research, or is there a separate source for that? Because that's a very potent statement right there.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
You mean these conditions?
Yes.
That's simple math.
No, I know, but like, is this what you developed as part of this process, or is this already like a norm in the industry? Because
I don't think it's a norm in the industry, but I think it's, to some extent, the capital market is really it's profitable growth, right?
Right.
And I think it's not so. It's not surprising if you are getting to the ceiling of one of these factors, then it says, well, you should better push the other one too.
It's like I'm looking at like return on invested capital at being greater than 2 times WACC as the driver for growth, meaning you're essentially under leveraging your cash flows at that point, right? Like you should be able to grow more because you're making so much money. So that relationship, is that the heuristic you developed from running this study, or is that a separate source of information? So this is really relevant.
This is quite devastating.
It's a corporate valuation. Actually, it has nothing to do with the study itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is using the formula for corporate.
This should be a cheat sheet for every CMO. This slide right here.
Yeah, it's a brilliant slide.
It's so simple.
Well, I was surprised when I was because the formula looks much more complex.
Yeah.
But just looking, so let's see how can I reduce it to some more simple message that is in the formula, and it turns out it is pretty simple.
It is. That's
But it's just the mathematics of valuation of discounted cash flow analysis.
So that was one. Second question. You had the gap for Harley Davidson of 656 million in under leverage. Using this approach, what would you use as an acceptable investment level to activate that gap? Like what ratio? Like is it a 1/10 of the value of the gap? Like should be investing $65 million? Like how do you calculate that?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's the question you did not answer. Because the allocation heuristic I showed is also developed from a mathematical optimization approach under constraint. That constraint was by assuming there's a budget which is not unlimited, which is limited. But we did not look at the question before, how much should the overall budget be? Because that's basically, it's the total marketing budget that you have available for the brand, that you need to invest into developing the brand by focusing on which of these three fundamental strategies. There are also ways to determine what would be the optimal budget level, but I can't, unfortunately, I can't bring this into a very simple formula, but it's possible. We did not look at this.
But it gives essentially like, so is that 656 like a size of prize, or is that like an under-leveraged asset?
Well, that's what is the potential once you are reallocating the money appropriately, assuming you have a large enough budget, but the best way would be to say, well, from what we have been using last year, that's now just reposition and reprioritizing on activities.
Okay, so that's a firm value gap. It's 656 million and under leveraged.
That's the increase in firm value that you could generate by redirecting these resources.
Yes, size of price.
You know what I really like about this directional framework? One of them is helping me solve the problem and data construction. But it's talking language of finance, marketing, and sales in one heuristic. Without having to do translation between them. It's like a very
This is a great one pager.
Yeah.
Can we use this?
Of course. The research is published. I'm not recommending. I would happy if you read the science article, but it's
is it in German?
No, it's in English. It's tougher to German.
Is it 50 pages?
It's not because of the pages. I think we're also entertaining, but we're entertaining in weeks and books.
Yeah.
That makes it a little bit harder to digest, but we also want to see that we can bring this into some more transfer publications, where it's easy accessible for a different audience. It's just serving different markets.
Joanna, we need to have Marc back more. Every presentation has been a mic drop.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, I want to know what would it look like? You're getting back to your gap. What would it look like for
Louis Vuitton. I don't have the numbers, but you can look at the numbers for Louis Vuitton. I guess would be they are highly profitable. Sometimes the cost of capital would not suffice. I think it's probably much higher. So they should grow, but I think they're also doing pretty well and using the brand to grow. That's what
I was wondering, is there anybody who has no gap? That seems most likely can be I can think of.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Did you share this with that most likely?
No, I'm driving German producers of cars. Well, I have no contact right now.
How did you define class to determine best of class, best in class, and what was the best in class in the case of Harley Davidson?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we are using it's an econometric approach, which is called the efficient frontier analysis. What you do is it's some sort of efficiency analysis. You use data on all the competitors and firms you have in that sample. And then you estimate by understanding the performances of each of these firms, what is attainable, what is the frontier of the efficiency, and then you look at the difference for the specific case to identify the inefficiency for a specific firm. That takes into account the differences firms are operating. Could be different competitive conditions. They have different resources available, and controlling for each of these questions to estimate that efficient frontier. It's a theoretical kind of concept.
Yeah, but example, there's other motorcycle manufacturers.
Yeah. It's a sample. Actually, we've it's across all the industries that are consumer relevant. The brands also have some B2B business. Every of these brands, but many of them. But basically, it's a B2C perspective here, and it's across all these industries. But you could, it's up to your definition. If you have a strategy process and you say, well, you would like to look at the best strategic competitor in the class, then that could be the approach.
If the competitor is Honda, do you just look at their sales based on motorcycle sales to determine the value to their brand equity for that division, or how do you?
No, you need to, I mean, that's a little bit of a tricky part in a sense that you need to measure what is the elasticity of improving the brand rating, how that translates into improving the financial value driver profitability, for example. And that's the information that we also do this by using a marketing mix model, basically, to estimate that relationship. Could also think of other ways, but I'm not saying that this is the only number which is not directly available from the financial data or from the market research data.
So you look at the brand value gap, like groups that you did, it's very different.
Yeah, there was differences. I mean, the classical consumer brands, they're having the smallest gap. This is P&Gs of Europe, and so they are doing best across the industries. Telecommunication, I remember, was pretty bad. They were not really leveraging what was in their brands. And automotive was in the middle, more or less. I would need to look up to the results, but there are differences across the industries. But also within industries, and then across the another example, we have an example of CVS and Progress. And so CVS was doing much better, though both had almost the same brand rating according to the academic. But when you look also at the market valuation and interbrand valuation of the brands, there were quite some substantial differences. And that resonates well with when you look at the performances on what they activated, which drivers they activated, and how efficiently they were activating these drivers. There were big differences. CVS was doing much better than Progress.
But I visualize this as distance to the frontier.
So again, please?
But I visualize this as distance for the firm.
Yeah.
And the distance from the distance between where the firm is on the graph to the frontier.
Well, if we look at, it needs to be done for each of these financial value drivers. Yeah. So if we look at profitability, then you have the curve, and you put, and that's basically what we have in the, which is also underlying the allocation approach. Yeah. You see here the brand elasticity efficiency gap. Yeah? That's the distance to the efficient frontier. Yeah. And you see for the growth drivers, it's the largest.
Well, I think at that we've reached our time, but that was a very evocative way to go into a break. So thank you very much.